How you guys doing? Good morning. Everybody ready to rock this house or what? That video was powerful. One of the reasons why I was slow to come out here is the chills just rushed through me. I was backstage with my son, and I was prepping him to come out on stage with me, and right as we were walking up, he got a little bit of stage fright. But he'll get over it. You know, we got a lot of time to work on that. But you know, it's fascinating because when I see the pictures that you just saw, I remember vividly when I was 260 pounds. I had just, you know, lost control over my weight. I quit focusing on it like many of us do. I didn't have a simple solution. I'd want to put more time, effort, and energy into my career than I was going to into working out and into proper nutrition. And by the time I was about 25 years old, I was considered obese by the BMI index, 260 pounds. And as a result of that, you know, I suffered. Now, the experiences that come to mind the most about my journey of obesity was, first it was a self-image issue. You know, I remember putting on clothes, and then I'd just kind of be in the closet, and I'd take them off. And I'd put on a pair of clothes, a shirt, and I'd be like, I can't wear that, and I'd throw it off. And then I'd put on a pair of jeans, and I'd be like, I can't wear that, and I'd throw it off. And having, been without means, clothes are expensive. And so I remember thinking to myself, man, I love these jeans. I can't afford to buy a new pair of jeans or a new shirt or a new sweater all the time. And so I remember the slight costs and self-image issues that came with it. I remember having a lower self-esteem. I remember people making fun of me. People at my office at the time, I was the CEO of Sky Pipeline, they would say, you're chubby. They would say, they'd touch my belly. And I remember the way that felt. You know, I'd smile, make a joke about it. I know many of you know what I'm talking about, and I said, I can't go to the gym every day. Two, one of my big issues with obesity was I have a love for all things that include ranch dressing. I mean, I'll eat pizza with ranch dressing. I'll put ranch dressing on anything and everything, and and I'm not giving that up. And then my other issue is I also like ice cream. Oh man, I could put down a gallon of ice cream. And then my other issue is I like potato chips, all things potato chips. And there's nothing more gratifying than getting to the end of that bag of potato chips. Especially those chili cheese Fritos. Man, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? You guys know exactly, or whoever invented the idea of putting ranch on potato chips, Doritos ranch potato chips, right? Yep, I know obesity very, very well. You know, it didn't really become impactful to me until one time, when you guys saw some of the pictures last night, when I was about 260 pounds, I wanted to travel because I'd never traveled growing up. You know, I'd never been on a plane. My family had no means. I mean, we were poor. And I was going to Tahiti, and I saved up enough money for a vacation of my dreams. I was gonna have one of those cabanas on in the water, where you have the glass floor and you look down at the water. I was gonna take a trip to a private island that was owned by Marlon Brando called Titi Aurora, if I recall. I was gonna go swimming with the whales, diving with the sharks. Like, this kid had never dreamed about taking such a vacation. And, I'd become successful enough to save up for that, but it was, probably a lot of my savings, if not most or all of my savings for me to do this vacation. And I'm so excited. I get the time off, schedule the time off. I remember walking in my garage to grab my suitcase. I bend over to pick it up. Boom, my back goes out. For the next hour, I sat there on the garage floor, realizing that I wasn't going to have that vacation. Crawling about an inch. I mean, I couldn't even bear the shooting pains. My muscles were clenching. My back was spazzing. It took me over an hour to crawl from the garage to get to the phone so that way I could make a call to ask for help. I couldn't. For 2 days, I sat in that bed taking pain medications, just in dire pain, to the point where it would take me about 45 minutes to get from my bed to my bathroom, and then another 45 minutes to get back. And that wasn't just one occasion. It happened once, and then and as it happened that time, I remember saying, there goes my vacation. Something I had planned and dreamed of my whole life that I'd saved up for, and I was like, wow, it's gone. It's not refundable. And then it happened again 6 months later, and this time I was in bed longer, taking more pain medications, having more shooting pains, and the residual effect of it would be I'd walk with bad posture, I'd be in meetings, cramping up, having these shooting pains. And then it happened 3 months later, and then it started happening every month, to the point where I would be literally bedridden for days at a time because of a chronic lower back issue, days at a time. And I remember thinking to myself, I was 24, 23, 24, 25 years old in that time frame, and I was like, what's going to happen by the time I'm 35? Right? If I'm suffering this much pain, this much consequences, how much more of my life is this going to take as I get older? I mean, am I going to be, handicapped by the time I'm 35 or 40 or whatever it is? So I went to the doctor, and what do you think the doctor told me? No, doctor didn't tell me to lose weight. He told me I needed spinal fusion. That's what doctors do. They try to fix the problem once it's broken, not prevent it. And I asked the doctor, I said to him, I said, well, what are my alternatives? I don't want spinal fusion. Doctor's hand could slip, I could become paralyzed. He was walking me through the risks associated with such a procedure. And he said, well, you could do that or you could lose the weight. And to me, I was gonna give weight loss a try. Right? For the first time, I understood the consequences, personally, individually. I knew about the self-image side of it, but that wasn't enough to get me out of bed. Now all of a sudden I knew about the medical costs and consequences. And the irony of it is that's right around the time when I started getting very focused on my personal health so that I could avoid the consequences of the weight that I was carrying. That was right around the time that Nick Sarnicola, Blake Mellon, brought Dr. Michael Seidman into my life. And I saw that through nutritional science that you could help solve this problem. And I saw that Dr. Seidman, who you'll hear from later today, had spent his life trying to solve these types of problems. And as an entrepreneur, all we are really doing is trying to solve problems. And at that time in my life, I needed to solve my personal health problem. Some of you are going to get a message today, whether it's this one or another one, that's just going to wake you up and make you awaken that it's time to solve a problem. For me, I had to solve the problem of my personal health, and for some of you, you're going to get that same message here today. But this problem is one that is a problem of society. It's not just a problem of us individuals. In fact, I brought some facts for you here today. And the mission here that we're going to roll out is one that myself, Nick, and Blake, if you were here last night, have been thinking about all year round. And we ask ourselves what Visalis stands for. And as you can see, we're just trying to take some weight off the world and leave it better than we found it. And looking at this problem, I asked ourselves inside one of the meetings that we do with our various leaders and employees and the founders, and I said, why isn't there a face to obesity? Why aren't there causes and organizations set up to solve this problem? How come, if it is indeed the third largest reason for death, how come if 1.4 billion people are affected by it, how come there's no face of it? I realized that I was the face of obesity, but I'm no longer the face of obesity. Many of you are the face of obesity, and many of you no longer are, and many of you have been impacted by it. You've seen the consequences of it affecting your family members. Every single one of you has been impacted by it because it affects you greatly as taxpayers. 24 million children are overweight or obese in the United States and Canada. And it's an epidemic that is growing at a catastrophic rate. 2.8 million people die each year. 2.8 million people die each year as a result of obesity-related illnesses. That's 7,671 people per day. Think about that for a second. Today, you woke up. Some of you didn't sleep yet. You woke up at 8 a.m. By the time you go to sleep, 7,671 people will have passed. Now, how come so many people are dying of this disease and no one's facing it head on? Or the solutions that they're providing are, well, I don't think they meet the gravity of the illness. Well, we did some research at ViSalus, and we found that $4.2 billion a year is spent by the fast food industry. Advertising. $4.2 billion. Many of you saw how the election and the amount of advertising in the US election and how frequently that was. That was far less than $4.2 billion worth of advertising. And if you recall how you just seemed like you couldn't escape it, well, all of you have been advertised to roughly 10,000 times a year by fast food. And you probably don't realize it. 1.6 billion of that spend is spent directly targeting kids. Imagine $1.6 billion targeting kids, so that way they will adopt poor eating habits. It's fascinating, isn't it? The fast food industry has 144,000 restaurants in the United States. $170 billion industry. Now, how does such an industry create such a problem and not become the face of obesity? How do we go with heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, and all the various obesity and related illnesses? How do we as a society exist with 10,000 advertisements hitting us, and we don't treat this disease just like we treat tobacco or cancer or any of the other catastrophic attacks on humanity? How come? Well, 95% of all advertising in fast food is focused on unhealthy junk, and primarily focused on your children and my children. You know, I found another statistic that was interesting. I want you to remember a number of 175 million. 175 million is the amount of money spent on lobbyists to hide this problem, to cover it up, to pretend that it doesn't exist, to make the face of obesity one that's something that's cute, that's likable, one that our society is okay with. I'm not okay with the $190 billion in direct medical costs, 50% of which are out of your taxpayer dollars for those people who can't help themselves. I'm not okay with the $6 billion in workplace absenteeism that makes our society lose its competitive advantage. I'm not okay with the $30 billion in lost productivity that our society has as a result of the illnesses and the consequences. I'm not okay with the $76 billion obesity penalty, meaning if you're obese, you're going to make less wages and have less of an opportunity. I'm not okay with the people that are trying to cover up these facts. I'm certainly not okay with the $1 trillion that obesity will cost our society by the year 2030, just for the children that it impacts alone. $1 trillion. Now, it was entrepreneurial spirit that created this problem. And all entrepreneurship is solving problems. And so it's going to take an entrepreneurial spirit, one of mass force. It's going to take tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of entrepreneurs to solve this problem. It took us a long time to get into this mess. It's going to take us a long time to get out of it. There's only one thing that'll solve this problem, and that is for a group of people that are unlikely to focus, to first take responsibility for themselves, for their own health. As I shared with you in my personal story, that was the first step in my journey. Then to take responsibility for their family. I'll never forget being on the Founders Tour. And a woman came up to me who had lost 170 some odd pounds. And I was just in awe, and I asked her, I said, why did you do it? It was in Longview, Texas. I said, why'd you do it? She says, you know why? You know why I did it? I want to introduce you to my daughter. And her daughter comes up there, and she said, I'll never forget it. She said, well, because I was heavy, she was starting to make some decisions that were getting her picked on in school, getting her bullied. And I realized that I was enabling my daughter to be in this condition that was hurting her self-esteem, hurting her health, hurting her long-term success as a human being. And so I decided that I was going to take weight off for my child, so that way I could be that role model and that leader in the family that she needed and be that example. I thought to myself, wow, if you're not going to do it for yourself, why not do it for the children? Now, you never know where an idea will come from. And that night, I had one of those nights. I'll never forget her story. I had one of those nights where I was just restless, couldn't sleep. And as an entrepreneur, I started thinking about the problem. And I was like, well, there's a lot of kids out there that can't afford to get the right help, the right education, and the right healthy fast food. And I started thinking about how could ViSalus potentially solve the problem? How could us parents solve the problem? We knew our cause was going to be to end the worldwide obesity epidemic. We knew that we were going to direct our budget and our vast resources at solving this. We knew about the stories of the one I just shared with you, of the mother in Longview. We knew of the testimonies. We knew that we're going to be able to solve this problem. We knew it was going to take a lot of time, a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, a lot of us taking initiative for our own health, and responsibility for our own health, and then for our families, and then for our communities, for our churches, for our states, for our countries. But what about those who can't take responsibility for themselves yet? What about for those children? Who's going to help them? For those of us who can't afford to take some weight off, we have that solution. But what about the people who can't afford it? That 50% of the $190 billion that I talked about. The $190 billion in medical expenses, 50% paid for by the government. What about those people? How do we help them? How do we help them? Last night I told you that one of the most amazing parts of my journey as an entrepreneur was that deal that I made when I was 17 years old, and my mom introduced me to a millionaire entrepreneur. And I made this deal. The man upstairs, I said, God, if this is the way for me out of the prison that I've put myself in, I'll spend the rest of my life giving back. I didn't know it at the time. But that commitment that I made, that deal that I made, I knew that I'd have to honor it. And having been so blessed to have risen above my socioeconomic status, having been so blessed to having gone through the costs and consequences and the mental difficulties that obesity has, having been so blessed to having been a kid that went without food, a kid where the only food that we ate was macaroni and cheese, and we ate it every single day, a kid who didn't get the right proteins, didn't get the right fibers, didn't get the right vitamins and nutrients, a kid who suffered in school because of that. I remember the hunger pains vividly. And our charitable endeavors have yielded, in connection and conjunction with, in partnership with our promoters, 2 million meals so far to kids who needed food. Last night I told you that in 2012, myself, Nick, and Blake realized we're on a different mission, one that may take for the rest of our lives to solve, one that we may never actually be alive to see solved, but one we're committed to solving and working toward for the rest of our lives. And last night you heard me say, you know, when my son's asked, why is he proud of his name? Because I was never proud of my name growing up. I was, in fact, ashamed of it. I dream that my son will say, because my daddy, or maybe his son will say, because my daddy's daddy got together with a group of other families back a long, long time ago. And they saw the biggest problem facing humanity. Much like great entrepreneurs who have built great legacies, the Rockefellers, the Fords, the Gettys. They solved the big problem, the biggest problem, in fact, $1 trillion problem. And that problem that they solved, well, you probably don't know of it, you probably have never heard of it, because it doesn't exist anymore. See, once upon a time, there was this thing called the worldwide obesity epidemic. And the reason why I'm proud of my family's name is because my family, along with a bunch of others, your families, got together and solved it. That's the legacy that I want to leave behind, and that's the legacy that I want you to leave behind. Now, some of you who are paying keen attention realize that I said last night that I would steer our philanthropic efforts and that we would create a solution never before seen, one that is both giving to those who can't afford to solve the problem while helping those who can. Last night you heard Nick Sarnicola say that we only rolled out the first 50% or so of the new Body by Vi 90-day challenge in January, and that the next, and what I would argue the most important piece of the new Body by Vi 90-day challenge will roll out here today. Last night you heard the stories of myself, Nick, and Blake, and our mastermind, our leaders, the founding team members. You heard us say that we do things based on our values at ViSalus, and that we have this attitude that will never stop, no matter what, ups or downs, thick or thin, better or worse, richer or poorer. Yes, I'm married to ViSalus. Last night you heard us talk about how focused we are, single-mindedly focused on solving this obesity epidemic. Single-mindedly focused. We're the only company within our industry that is only thinking about purely solving this problem. Some companies, they have a variety of different interests. They sell beauty, they sell makeup, they sell nutrition, they sell anything and everything they possibly can to anyone and everyone who will buy it. Our only interest is in solving this problem. You'll hear today about our international expansion. You'll hear us say why. Why are we expanding internationally? To solve the worldwide obesity epidemic, to solve this problem. Why are we not going to China? Because they are yet to face this epidemic, but they soon will. And when they're ready for us, we'll probably be there by that time. But until then, we're going to go one country at a time and solve this epidemic one country at a time until those 1.4 billion people no longer suffer from the cost and consequences, until that $1 trillion, until those 7,641 people a day goes down, till the place in time when our children's children can say, much like the children of the polio epidemic can say, it no longer exists. This problem will be solved. You are with the company that is going to solve it. Your family's legacy, if you so choose, will be to have been a part of solving humanity's greatest problem and greatest crisis. That is the crest that'll hang on your family's wall for generations to come. Your legacy, our legacy. But I've left you a question here today. I told you we're going to steer our philanthropic efforts. I told you we're going to help those who can't help themselves. I told you we're going to systematically solve this problem through entrepreneurial spirit and through our value of prosperity. And the person who's going to answer that question for you is not me. He's the individual that I sit in the room with and come up with sometimes just crazy ideas. The very solution you're about to hear about next, the answer to the question that I presented to you, was me sitting in a room with this individual and a few members of our corporate team, and me saying, I have this expression in our office, I say the path is all math, meaning there is some mathematical equation to solve this problem. What is it? If you can pose the question, then you can answer it mathematically. And I learned that having heard about the story of how Einstein solved the theory of relativity, because he just kept asking himself this question. And one night he woke up in his sleep Now, I'm not trying to compare myself to Albert Einstein, but I did have a sleepless night in Longview, Texas, thinking, how can us parents who can't afford to lose the weight, who know that we need to, on behalf of the children in our society and in our families, how can us parents pitch in and do our duty? My grandmother, who you saw the picture of last night, she's 98 years old, she told me of a time that when we were in World War II, when her husband, whom she just had met and got married, I think it was within 2 months, had been drafted overseas to go fight in the war. She told me at that time America was called to a duty and that people would donate their pots and pans, their aluminum. They would volunteer, that everyone was chipping in our society to do their very part to make sure that we were able to preserve our society, preserve our democracy, and solve the largest crisis that was facing us at that time. She told me of that draft. She told me of the volunteerism. She told me of her commitment. And she'd share with me her scrapbook, how she would track it, the letters that would come once every couple months from her new husband. She told me of that level of commitment. And I was reflecting that night in Longview, Texas, how it's going to take that level of commitment from us to solve this very crisis, that level of volunteerism, that level of focus, that level of commitment. So I went into the office after that night in Longview, Texas on the Founders Tour, and I grabbed my right-hand man, the person who takes some of my crazy ideas and makes them better. And I said, Blake, we have to solve childhood obesity. And it's got to be done by us parents. And it's got to be done within the New Body by Vi 90-day challenge. It's got to be seamless, meaning every time someone takes off weight who can't afford to, we got to help someone who can't afford to. And mathematically, I think that if we're able to do that, if we're able to find the economics, the system, if we're able to channel the spirit of our 75,000 promoters, of our millions of customers, if we're able to harness that entrepreneurial spirit, I think we might be able to solve this problem. As you heard last night, the founders, we each add one component of the various systems that run the company. Nick working in the field systems, Blake working in the marketing and sales systems, and me working more in the strategy and operational systems. I'm going to ask to come out on stage to tell you about the solution that he and his team created based on a question that I posed. And I have to tell you, I think, as I told you when I was in Jamaica and I saw that we could feed kids that are hungry, I have to tell you that this solution, I think, will be the solution, will be the one thing that sets ViSalus apart from the rest of the companies in our competitive field, sets us apart from the fast food industry, sets us on track to solve this very problem. I believe this is the one thing that 3 years from now, you will say, I was in the room to be a part of. I believe this is the one thing that gives you new people in the room a better opportunity than the people who came in the day before you. This is the one thing that if you're brand new and you've just signed up today, you have a better ViSalus opportunity than the person who signed up yesterday. This is that one thing that'll set ViSalus on the global path to end the worldwide obesity epidemic with the spirit of entrepreneurship and a fuel to our fire, unlike any one thing we have ever done in the 8 years of our business history. I believe this is that thing that'll make your family's legacy cemented in stone for eternity. And I'm going to invite my partner, Mr. Blake Mellon, onto the stage to present.